Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Joining me on the phones right now, it's been a while since we've had our next guest on, the Director of Korea Studies at the Center for National Interest, Harry Kazianis, joining us. Harry, welcome back. How are you today?
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Appreciate you joining us. Last week I was broadcasting from the Texas State Capitol, or otherwise I would have had you on, because obviously with the TrumpKim Summit blowing up, or the president walking away from that summit, it made a lot of news, but it's still relevant today. And there are a lot of things that are still, I think, going on today. What was your reaction to the president walking away from the TrumpKim Summit? And where does this administration go from here?
Well, I think it was a difficult choice for the president. On the one hand, there was a deal on the table. It was an imperfect deal, but essentially the North Koreans agreed to take down one of their bigger nuclear facilities, a facility called Yongbyon, which, experts will vary on what they say, but it produces about 40 to 50% of North Korea's nuclear weapons. So it's not insignificant. It's a pretty big deal. The challenge is, of course, the North Koreans wanted the vast majority of the important sanctions that we put on them back in 2016 and 2017 through the UN Security Council. Challenge is, it isn't a comparable ask. The North Koreans are taking down a big part of their nuclear program, but at the same time, we're gutting the sanctions regime. And then all the billions of dollars that they would get from those sanctions coming off, they could build more nuclear weapons. So the president, I think, countered with that, saying he would get rid of all the sanctions if they completely took out their whole nuclear and chemical and biological weapons program. North Koreans said no, and here's where we are today.
And so, for me, this was a smart move from the president, because it doesn't seem as though the administration lost anything by walking away, because it's not like the administration told them, we're never going to talk to you guys again, correct?
Exactly. And you know what the funny thing is? A lot of people, more on the left side than anything else, they're saying, the summit was a disaster for the president. It was terrible. It made him look weak. Actually, I have to tell you something. I was very, very impressed in how the president handled it, how he handled the press conference. He didn't go down the trope of calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man or going down the fire and fury path. Actually, both sides were very complimentary of the other. They both agreed that they were going to come back to the negotiating table, that diplomacy wasn't over. And it's interesting. There's been a maturing of this relationship where I think both sides realize that it's not anybody's interest to go back to the dark days of 2017. So I actually think this summit was a lot more positive than a lot of people have spinned it, because you can actually see that both sides really want to do something. We've just got to get to the right deal where it makes sense for everybody.
How is the relationship right now, and the what I heard before the TrumpKim Summit, that this was another mistake that the president was making, getting together, and that we haven't seen anything from North Korea. Yet I go back to when you and I first started having conversations on this show, we were talking about millions of people possibly dying because of nuclear war. We're not worried about that right now. So it seems to me this has been a good. I don't know about a good relationship, but there has been progress here between the United States and North Korea and South Korea.
There has. And you know what's funny? I think we have a very warped perception of how powerful North Korea is. Think about this for a second. If Kim Jong-un ever used his nuclear weapons on anybody, here's what would happen. One U.S. ballistic missile submarine that was built in the 1970s could destroy North Korea within 20 minutes. Think about how lopsided our power dynamic is with them. So the most important thing, Chad, is that we don't have a war with North Korea, that millions of people don't die. And the good thing is even if they never give up their nuclear weapons, we know how to play the game of deterrence with countries that have nukes. We do it all day with the Chinese. We do it all day with the Russians, and we're really good at it. So no matter what happens, even if they don't give up those nukes, we know how to contain the situation. And the North Koreans will be the ones who don't prosper. Their economy doesn't grow as fast as they could. And it's their situation to lose. So no matter what happens, we are in a good position.
Visiting with Harry Kazianis here on the Chad Hasty Show. So what should the United States do next when it comes to North Korea?
I think what we've got to do is take a little break. We've had a lot of diplomacy consistently for months at a time. Sure, Mike Pompeo and everybody on the U.S. side as well as the North Korean side, they're probably a little tired. We'll probably take a couple weeks to sort of get our collective heads to figure out where we are. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a smaller deal that's going to come out. I think what you're going to see is probably, some sort of trade for Yongbyon where there'll be a little bit smaller sanctions relief than the North Koreans wanted. But I also think you're going to see a peace declaration that's going to end the Korean War. I think a lot of Americans want that. I think a lot of North Koreans and South Koreans want that. And probably liaison offices in Pyongyang and Washington. Because we have to be able to talk to one another. I mean, think about during the Cold War when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Imagine if there was no Soviet embassy where we could actually communicate back to one another. If we have another missile crisis with North Korea and we have no way to communicate, that's a problem. So I think when we sort of sit down and rethink about this problem, I think those are three things you're probably going to say.
What does South Korea want out of all of this? I mean, obviously they don't want the North invading, but what long term do you think South Korea wants?
South Korea is in a very complex situation. And on one hand, they look at the North, they see their lost brethren, they see their countrymen, essentially. I mean, imagine if the United States was still cut in two after the Civil War. I mean, that is sort of the part of the problem that we're seeing. But at the same time, the South Koreans look at the North as their economic future. I mean, South Korea is no longer the Asian tiger growing at 8 and 10% anymore. Their population isn't growing anymore. That's could actually start shrinking soon. Their economic growth is slower. They look at the North as a huge economic prize. What they're afraid of is that just to the north, that China will move in and start doing all that development work, pulling out trillions of dollars in minerals that are in North Korea. So there's essentially a race to Pyongyang and who's going to get there first. And South Korea wants to make sure that they're the ones that get there first.
Is there a desire for the unification? I know North Korea has talked about that, but is there a desire for that or just economic unification?
I think there's a desire for both. I think very long term, I think you will see a united Korea peninsula. I think that's probably inevitable. I think in the short term, though, I think the North Koreans realize that their economy needs to grow, that they cannot be the economic basket case of Asia anymore. And at the same time, that the South Koreans realize that they don't want to lose North Korea to China long term. That's, if you press South Korean officials, that is their biggest fear, that there won't be any deal with the United States, and the North Koreans will just say, you know what, I'm tired of all this. I'm just going to go to Beijing and let them invest billions of dollars. And you know what? We might not have as much control of our foreign policy and our way of life, but at least we know we'll be secure. That's the thing that Seoul is really most scared about.
Yeah, when you look long term, and this is a question that I talked about with friends, and we just had this discussion of North Korea and the awakening of the people in North Korea, and you talk about unification long term. How does that work with a population that has been kept in the dark ages? And I know that that information does flow inside North Korea, but you still have a lot of people who look at the Kim family as gods. And I mean, you talk about a life-changing, world-changing event. It would be unification. How would something like that even work?
Well, you know what? There is changes starting to happen in North Korea. You really have to dig down in the research to find them. I'll give you an example. This is something a lot of people don't know. 70% of North Korea's economy is actually a market-based economy. So a lot of people don't know that, but there's been a lot of changes that Kim Jong-un has put in place. There's small things like, when people are in collective farms, whatever they're able to actually farm past the quota that Kim tells them, they can keep that and sell that. There's markets that are opening up in North Korea. The fishing stocks are actually, a lot of it is allowed to be fished by private enterprise now. So things are starting to change very slowly there. And what could happen? I mean, you never know. I mean, these are some of the things that happened during the old Soviet Union where things started opening up, but people's eyes started to get bigger and started to think, well, why can't we be like the United States or Western Europe? Why can't we be capitalist? And then, the next thing happens, Chad. They want human rights. They want to be able to publish. So this is how change happens. We just have to watch it carefully, but it is all very possible.
Yeah, very interesting. Harry Kazianis, Director of Korea Studies at the Center for National Interest. All right, so I always get your predictions. They're always fun. You predict in the next few weeks, it'll take a few weeks, but we'll start seeing some more movement out of between North Korea and the United States.
Here's a prediction. There's going to be a third Kim-Trump summit. So get ready, get your popcorn. Who knows? Maybe it's in Hawaii. You never know. But there will be another summit. Because I think both of these leaders realize it's in their interest to have better relations. And I think we're going to be in treat for another another summit.
All right, Harry Kazianis, as always, appreciate your time, and we'll visit with you as we get to hear more about North Korea and the United States.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Harry Kazianis, Director of Korea Studies at the Center for the National Interest.